Brian, welcome. This is our second History and Heritage Group presentation on a history of our oldest lodges. And this evening, we're very much looking forward to a paper on the history and heritage of the Lodge of Edinburgh, Mary's Chapel, number 1. Firstly, if I may, I'll just ask if you can make sure that you are muted and that you do have your video on. Well, one or two introductions, if I may, important introductions. First of all, can I introduce and welcome our Grand Master Mason, Brother Ramsay McGee, who has joined us this evening. We're delighted to have you, Grand Master Mason. It's great that you have given us your time and your support for this History and Heritage initiative. So thank you very much, sir, and you're very, very welcome. I would also, of course, extend a warm welcome to us two speakers this evening, Brother Ian Rutherford and Brother Scott Harrison from the Lodge of Edinburgh, Mary's Chapel, number 1. And you'll hear more by way of an introduction on our two speakers in just a few moments. Our Grand Master Mason will introduce our two speakers. I might also, if I may, welcome Brother Tom Jessup, who is the Chair of the Information and Communications Committee in Grand Lodge. Delighted to have Brother Tom with us this evening. And also I noticed that Brother Andy Mushet has joined us, the Provincial Grand Master of Glasgow. Again, a warm welcome to Brother Andy Mushet, and indeed to all. Besides myself as Chair of the the group, I'm delighted that we have Charles Winston and Gordon Meekie, who are acting as hosts tonight and will keep me right in all the technicalities. And we also have brothers Alistair Henderson and Douglas Nichol from the History and Heritage Group. Delighted to have them with us, of course. And for those who are not already aware about the History and Heritage Group, a subgroup of the Information and Communications Committee, we have an excellent, I would say, and perhaps a demanding remit. That is to identify, collect, record, preserve and promote the history and culture of the Scottish craft. And I know I speak for all members of the History and Heritage Group when I say that we are absolutely delighted to be involved in such an undertaking. In this series of presentations on the history of our oldest lodges, designed to remind our audiences that Scotland does have the oldest lodges in the world, and that underlines the fact that Scotland is the home of modern Freemasonry. This evening's proceedings are being recorded, Brian, so if you want to review them, you'll see them again tomorrow on the Scottish Craft Freemasonry Group, the Facebook page, or if you speak to others who have missed out this evening, you can guide them towards that, and they can view it at their leisure. At this time, I'd now invite our host to ensure, firstly, that everybody is muted. Thank you. Tonight's presentation, as I say, the history of the Lodge of Edinburgh, Mary's Chapel, number 1, is in the very capable hands of Brother Ian Rutherford and Brother Scott Harrison. Brother Ian Rutherford, of course, is a past master of the Lodge, and Brother Scott Harrison is currently the master. I would ask, Brian, if you do have any questions, to keep them until after the completion of the presentations and not to interrupt, and probably best if you could firstly post your questions on the chat room. Before we move to that, I would like now to invite our Grand Master Mason, Brother Ramsay McGee, if he'd be good enough to give a fuller introduction on our speakers this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Good evening, brethren. It's really nice to see you returning for this second lecture in the series. And if I could give a very special welcome to those of you who are joining us for the first time, I have no doubt at all that you will enjoy the evening. If I could now introduce to you our two speakers this evening. First of all, the Master of the Lodge, Brother Scott Harrison. Scott is originally from Missouri in America. He moved to Edinburgh to complete his master's degree in education at the University of Edinburgh, and is currently working as the Associate Director of Student Services at the City of Glasgow. Scott joined the Lodge of Edinburgh Mary's Chapel in 2006. And over the years, he's served the Lodge as the Director of Ceremony, the Director of Music. And he's been through all what we tend to call the progressive offices. And he was installed as Master of the Lodge in December last year. And Scott is also involved in the Provincial Grand Lodge of Edinburgh as one of the Provincial Grand Stewards. And secondly, we have someone who really needs no introduction whatsoever. He's a past master of this lodge, a past master of Lodge Sir Robert Murray, a past Provincial Grand Master of the Provincial Grand Lodge of Edinburgh. He is a past Deputy Grand Master, and he is soon to be the Deputy Grand Master and Governor of the Royal Order of Scotland. Brethren, Brother Ewan Rutherford.
Thank you.
We welcome you both, and we look forward to your presentation this evening. So, brethren, can I ask you now to give a very warm welcome to Brothers Harrison and Rutherford. Thank you. It's a muted welcome, but you're welcome all the same.
Thank you, Grand Master Mason, Brother Ramsay McGee, for that warm introduction of our two speakers this evening. Just before I invite Brother Ewan Rutherford to begin, can I offer my apologies to Brother Alexander, our Grand Senior Warden. I should have introduced him at the outset there, but I didn't, and I apologise, Alexander. Anyway, if I may now invite Brother Ewan Rutherford to begin this talk on the history of the Lodge of Edinburgh, Mary's Chapel, number 1. Brother Ewan, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Most worshipful Grandmaster Mason and brethren, Grandmaster Mason, thank you very much indeed for your introduction. Very flattering. It's good to see you looking so well, I have to say, and see your smiling face. Life's very different for us all Masonically, and it's kind of you to mention taking over the chairmanship of the Grand Lodge of the Royal Order of Scotland. That will still happen on the 3rd of July, but sadly we won't meet. It'll have to be some sort of virtual ceremony perhaps. It'll happen in my front room or whatever, but nonetheless I certainly look forward to that particular job as the months and years unfold, I hope. Brethren, can I firstly thank the members of the Grand Lodge of Scotland History and Heritage Group for the invitation to present as part of a series of talk about the old Masonic lodges. Scotland has a rich and powerful Masonic antiquity, which has for generations been revered around the world, and quite rightly so. We are all, I hope, proud of our membership of our mother lodge. I certainly am, and whilst I do not profess to be an authority on the history or any form of Masonic scholar, I have gleaned a bit of knowledge and some interesting facts about my mother lodge, probably because of my intense involvement and my lengthy time in the chair, and particularly surrounding the red letter date of the 31st of July 1999, which was the 400th anniversary of our oldest minute. Being master that particular year was the greatest honour indeed. And I really do feel sorry for so many of the masters of lodges who are having particular anniversaries this year during this coronavirus pandemic, who've not been able to achieve that happy event. Hopefully they will still enjoy and acknowledge and celebrate the milestones that their lodges have achieved. It was a particularly special time in my Masonic life, and one that I won't ever forget. The master of our lodge, Brother Scott McGregor Harrison, and I hope to be able to introduce to you some points of interest and mention some of the people that have been involved. Now, I do know that you all understand that to cover some 420 years in a short time is a challenge. So we will give you, I hope, a flavour to stimulate your interest. Sit lux, et lux fuit. Let there be light, and there was light. the motto of the Lodge of Edinburgh Mary's Chapel number 1, or I should say the Lodge of Edinburgh, for that is its proper title and designation. Mary's Chapel relates to the building at which the lodge met from 1613 until 1787. Mary's Chapel, or really St Mary's Chapel, was on the east side of Nydrys. It was built and endowed by Elizabeth, Countess of Ross in 1504 and dedicated to the Virgin Mary. It was purchased by the Incorporation of Wrights and Masons and converted into a convening house. Eventually, the chapel was demolished to make way for the building of the South Bridges, and I've often wondered what it was like to meet there. If any of you have visited Mary King's Close, which is located under the city chambers in Edinburgh and is now open to the public as a tourist attraction, I guess that might give you some idea to what it might have been like in Nydrys. The tenement buildings all crammed together, small decaying rooms, the smell, the atmosphere, probably a bit like a meeting of Grand Committee today. And then of course we have number 1. Well, the numbering of lodges was introduced after the Grand Lodge of Scotland was formed in 1736 at Mary's Chapel by the Lodge of Edinburgh and certain other old lodges. Over the years, I have to say that the lodge has had some pretty turbulent and difficult periods with the relationship with the Grand Lodge of Scotland. There was a particular time when a brother by the name of Alexander Duker was involved. He was quite instrumental and very involved in the Royal Arch chapter, I understand, but it was some pretty difficult times a couple of centuries ago. However, I'm very proud and happy to say that we've almost always had a reasonable working relationship with Grand Lodge and are a loyal and supportive lodge of both Grand Lodge and Provincial Grand Lodge. Brethren, Masonic historians have studied the origins of our craft for years. Many have tried to link our craft to ancient bodies or organisations, trying to produce some form of ancestry. Some have tried to fill in the gaps in our history, especially our prehistory, with statements and theories which have failed to stand up to the most basic tests. My own lodge's view has always been that, in my understanding, never to suggest we are anything other than one of the oldest Scottish lodges in existence. We are extremely proud of our documents and records, and as the Guinness Book of Records clearly states, the oldest known records of a lodge still in existence are those of the Lodge of Edinburgh Mary's Chapel number 1, starting in July 1599. By far the oldest known records of any lodge, not only in Scotland, but also anywhere in the world. Albeit we understand that our lodge and other operative lodges existed prior to 1598. For it was around this time that King James VI appointed William Shaw of Sauchie as Master of Works and all and sundry. Shaw was a great admirer of architecture. He was a keen traveller in Europe, and in 1589 the king included him in his retinue when he left Scotland to woo Princess Anne of Denmark. Shaw was sent home to prepare Holyrood and to improve its standard of comfort for the king and his new bride returning. Shaw was most diligent in all he undertook. It was he who was instrumental in the laying down of the rules and regulations to govern the mason trade, which had clearly lost its way in preceding years. He produced 2 statutes, one laying down rules to govern the trade, and the other a directive to lodges about precedency. Now, I have absolutely no wish to start any debate on precedency. However, the point of interest for me has always been that he declared that Edinburgh should be the first and principal lodge in Scotland for all time coming as of before. Now, the focus for me on that statement is the section which says as of before, for that was surely a clear indication that the lodge had been in existence or operational prior to 1598. It's worth mentioning we know that the lodge operating today is the same that he referred to back then, because Shaw wrote his statutes in our first minute book. Interestingly, as master, I took my obligations on our Geneva or our Breeches Bible, which was gifted to the lodge and for some reason has been embossed with the words existing in 1535. Now, I have no idea why that date is embossed on our Bible, but nonetheless, it's a suggestion. I understand there is also a reference in the archives of St Giles Cathedral about the Lodge of Edinburgh carrying out some restorative work on the cathedral, and it dates in 1515. But there's no actual reference of any organised lodge meetings as such, to my understanding. Brethren, all of my comments thus far have been about our lodge as an operative lodge, men who worked with manual skills, stonemasons. Now, talented and gifted men, but they transferred their knowledge by grip and word. However, at the meetings of the lodge, it would have to be a clerk or a notary who would write down the minutes of the meeting, for example. However, if the lodge was to develop, it would see a change, and the minutes record the introduction of the first non-stonemasons into Scottish or any other masonry. In 1634, William Lord Alexander and his brother Anthony Alexander, he was Master of Work to Charles I, and Sir Alexander Strachan of Thornton and Kincardineshire, who was a commissioner of the Exchequer. Excuse me. From this point on, the craft as we knew it grew from strength to strength, and this lodge knew no boundaries. They even went to England and recorded the first known meeting of any lodge on English soil. On the 20th of May 1641, members of the lodge convened at a special place in Newcastle. And it's been suggested to me it was pretty near St James's Park, and I was thinking it might have just been on that centre spot of the football field, but who knows about that either. Anyway, the lodge convened to admit two gentlemen into the mysteries and privileges of the craft. One was Alexander Hamilton, an artillery officer, and the other, now infamous, Robert Murray, Quartermaster General of the besieging Scottish Army. It's worth noting that Alexander Hamilton apparently was a talent and advised many on his technical abilities in relation to artillery. He has a gentleman and a brother who is now subject to study, I believe, at university. We've been asked for certain information about him, so hopefully we might find out something more about him in due time. Robert Murray was a particularly talented man, a founder of the Royal Society with a great number of interests. He was great friends with Alexander Bruce, the Earl of Kincardine, and he used his Mason mark to pen to the Earl of Elgin when he was in poor health, to share with him his feelings, his thoughts about how he might be restored back to good health, and to pick up his enthuse his spirits and jivvy him along, shall we say. They were very talented together. They had many interests, and one particular interest they had was in inventing a water-powered clock to calculate longitude and latitude for seagoing vessels. I'm not sure it was entirely successful, but I do know that that clock is now in the museum here in Edinburgh, and we as a lodge, Robert Murray Lodge, went to visit that, and it was really quite special, some hundreds of year old particular clock, which is worthy of further study. And of course we now have a lodge in Robert Murray's name. Our minute books record a detailed story of the development of our lodge, of the city of Edinburgh, and of the Scottish craft. A social history of Scots men. Countless men have been admitted one way or another, many visiting brethren have been received, and one prominent name to mention was Brother Dr. Theodocles Desaguliers. He had apparently been admitted a Mason in London, and while in the city of Edinburgh advising the council on waterways in an attempt to try and irrigate water from Comiston Springs into the city centre, he desired to be in attendance at the Lodge of Edinburgh. After some resistance by members of the lodge, they eventually agreed to receive him. Perhaps it was on the suggestion that he could bring influential gentlemen from the city to be admitted members of the lodge, and I think that probably helped his case. Desaguliers was a great friend of James Anderson, the man who wrote the constitutions for English Masons, and there has now been some suggestion that Dr. Desaguliers visited the Lodge of Edinburgh in 1721 to gain knowledge on the workings and the degrees, to return to London and to establish and form the United Grand Lodge of England. 1721, not 1717. It all seems rather reasonable to me. Perhaps England can have another celebration in a couple of years' time. One brother of the Lodge of Edinburgh who has made a sizable contribution to the bigger picture of Masonry and worthy of mention is Charles Morrison of Greenfield. He was born on the 1st of January 1780, son of James and Jane Morrison. He became a Freemason. He was entered, passed and raised all on the same evening of the 27th of November 1797. He was 17 years of age. And that was the particular night that the lodge had its annual meeting, and it still is. And so on the night after he'd had his 3 degrees, he was proposed and elected as junior warden that very same meeting. A meteoric rise, I would suggest. Brethren, I know we would find it somewhat disturbing that a 17-year-old would be admitted and given all 3 degrees on the same night. However, it was not unusual in the day. In fact, the Grand Lodge of Scotland records many lodges falling under censure of the Grand Lodge of Scotland for admitting boys as young as 12 years old. Anyway, almost a year later, Morrison, a medical student, received a string of degrees, many names and titles I don't even recognise, although we should mention that most of the degrees, even the craft degrees and rituals, were somewhat shorter and less intense than some of today. In 1802, Morrison graduated as a Doctor of Medicine and joined the Army, serving as a medical officer, the Prince of Wales 10th Hussars. He served with distinction all over the world. He met many Masons of knowledge and rank from many constitutions, although perhaps the most influential was Commandant de Grasse Tilly, who conferred on him the 32nd and 33rd degree. When Morrison retired, he took up residence in Paris until he died at the age of 69 years. He was a great collector of books and Masonic papers. Over his time, he amassed an amazing collection, probably one of the finest Masonic libraries, with over 2,000 books and pamphlets, including a first edition of James Anderson's Constitutions for the English Constitution. On the 14th of December 1849, the Grand Master Mason of the day, the 6th Duke of Atholl, whose painting you can see in Grand Committee Room, wrote to Mrs. Emily Morrison, widow of her brother, accepting on behalf of the Grand Lodge the Doctor's Masonic collection of books and manuscripts. The Morrison collection is now housed in our Freemasons Hall in George Street, a generous contribution indeed. Charles Morrison was the brother who erected the Supreme Council for Scotland in Edinburgh. And as many of you know, the Supreme Council for Scotland administered the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite in Scotland, those degrees from the 4th to the 33rd degree. There is a story to be told about the erection of the Rite in Scotland, but perhaps that's better left for another time. Suffice to say that this brother of Mary's Chapel introduced a valuable branch of Christian Masonry to be enjoyed by many. One book I'm particularly proud of is our bylaw book. Many lodges have a rule book for entrance, a roll book for entrance, and so on. In my mother lodge, every entered apprentice, affiliate brother, or honorary member would sign the bylaw book in the lodge, effectively agreeing to uphold and abide by the lodge bylaws. There are many signatures from very many brethren, men from all walks of life and varied backgrounds. But I wonder what it might have been like at the meeting in 1870 when His Royal Highness Brother Albert Edward and affiliated as a member of the lodge. And then again in 1933, His Royal Highness Edward, Prince of Wales, the Duke of Rothesay, also affiliated to the lodge. His signature can be seen in our book, and of course, to commemorate the princes, becoming members of the Lodge of Edinburgh, we have a decorative panel at the west side of the lodge room known as the Princess Panel under our lodge motto. Brethren, I think I've given you a flavour of the 16th, 17th, 18th centuries. So let me pass you over now to our master, Brother Scott Harrison, who will tell you something from our more recent times.
Thank you very much, Ewan. My name is Scott Harrison, and I'm the Master of the Lodge of Edinburgh Mary's Chapel, and it's my sincere pleasure to be co-presenting the history of our lodge with my brother, Ewan Rutherford, past Master of our lodge. I would also like to thank the Grand Lodge History and Heritage Group for their kind invitation to participate in this series of lectures. Ewan very ably provided our audience with a brief overview of the earlier history of our esteemed lodge. I'll now be sharing information with you on the comparatively more recent history of our lodge. In 1787, the Lodge of Edinburgh left their premises of St. Mary's Chapel in Nidries Wynd. Just trying to get my slide to change. There we go. To make way for the building of Southbridge. For approximately another century, they met in several different locations, including St. David's Lodge, the Mint, several taverns, hotels, and Freemasons' Hall. In 1893, they purchased 19 Hill Street, which at that time was occupied by a bookbinder's business for the princely sum of £1,000. And this has been our home for the next 127 years, where we have initiated approximately 1,170 brethren in that time. In our first degree lecture in the northeast corner, we remind the candidate that in a society so widely extended as Freemasonry, it cannot be denied that we have many members of rank and affluence. And in our second degree charge, we remind the candidate that while there are heights to which you strive, there are also depths from which you came, and that we should always be prepared to extend our hand and render our brother every service in our power. That is why I am so proud of the diversity of our membership today. Our members work as solicitors, doctors, teachers, garage proprietors, bankers, policemen, accountants, ministers, IT specialists, and scientists. And we have members from Scotland, England, Canada, the United States, Argentina, Portugal, Germany, Congo, Greece, and Italy. No matter what your background, you know that you will always be welcomed and supported in the Lodge of Edinburgh. The Lodge of Edinburgh currently has 101 members. We very much value the contribution of all of our members, not only to our own lodge, but also in provincial and grand lodge, as well as in other orders. Our members have been influential in shaping Scottish Freemasonry as it is known today, not least to mention 6 Grand Masters of the Grand Lodge of Scotland, but also pro-Grand Masters and Grand Office Bearers of other constitutions. And I'm sure you will all recognize a common household name and Edinburgh resident, the author Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who joined our lodge as an honorary member in 1901. Their time, effort, and talent are what makes us strong and able to continue to flourish after 421 years. We are very pleased that our premises are also home to Lodge Friendship number 1712 and the Rifle Lodge number 405. We're also proud to support Scotland's first university lodge, St. David number 36, which was formed in 2013. as well as a prominent Scottish research lodge, Lodge Sir Robert Murray No. 1641, whose master, Brother Adam Bruce, is a member of the Lodge of Edinburgh. He proudly follows in the footsteps of his father, Lord Elgin, who was one of the founders and first master of Lodge Sir Robert Murray when it was granted its charter in 1969. I was extremely proud to present Lord Elgin with his 70-year certificate as an honorary member of our lodge on the day of my installation on the 27th of December 2019. The concept of retention is very important to our lodge, and I'm sure to all of you as well. In 2015, we began a formal mentoring program. Each new initiate will meet with an experienced member after each degree to review the ritual and to have the opportunity to ask questions. In addition, we educate our new members on other Masonic subjects, including the office bearers, the jewels and aprons, harmony, deputations, general committee, the ashlars, and Grand Lodge and the Provincial Grand Lodge. We believe that involvement in Freemasonry is a constant pursuit in lifelong learning. We can all continue to research, participate, learn, and grow in our Freemasonry. We're very pleased that since our formal mentoring program began in 2015, we have held 61 mentoring sessions with 24 brethren, and of those brethren, we have a retention rate of 92%. Participation in Freemasonry is about history and ritual, but it is also about charity and fraternity. The Lodge of Edinburgh is very proud to have contributed a significant amount of charity in the last 10 years alone to extremely worthwhile charities supported by the Grand Lodge of Scotland, as well as the Provincial Grand Lodge of Edinburgh. These include motor neuron disease, Prostate Scotland, local food banks, the Ronald McDonald House, as well as other worthy charities. Another aspect of why most of us enjoy Freemasonry is the opportunity for fraternity and fellowship. Our social calendar is a very active one, which includes our annual installation, Burns Night, Ladies Night, Summer Barbecue, Autumn Social, and our annual Golf Club's Awards Dinner. It is quite well known in Scottish Freemasonry that golf is a staple of our lodge and of our craft. The first mention of golf in our lodge is the minute of the 27th of December, 1899. When Brother Colonel Cranston, treasurer of the city of Edinburgh, was presented with a handsome punch bowl designed by Brother R.K. Inches of the now Hamilton and Inches on George Street for annual competition among the golfers of the lodge, together with the first golf badge for the winner, who Brother Cranston promised to present annually as long as he was able. The next year, a committee was organized to arrange the Cranston Cup competition and to choose a lodge team for the Tercentenary Trophy. It was then, in 1904, that a formal golf club was created. The Tercentenary, or McKeever Cup, has been played for 116 times and won by the members of our lodge on 19 occasions, the most of any lodge participating. In 1999, our lodge had the honor of celebrating 400 years of existence during our Quatercentenary celebrations. With Brother Ewan Rutherford in the chair, the lodge hosted international brethren in a week-long program of events, including the principal meeting of 400 brethren at Freemasons Hall, followed by a banquet at the Sheraton Hotel, replicating a series of events which took place for the 300th anniversary. And of course, there was the publication of our past master, Joseph MacArthur's book of quatercentenary minutes. In closing, I think the future looks bright for the Lodge of Edinburgh. However, we do not take anything for granted, particularly now after this pandemic. We will continue to initiate new members and ensure that they are nurtured and supported and understand their role as the latest link and another part of the building upon the foundation stone of our ancient lodge and fraternity. And with thanks to our forefathers and the leaders of our lodge to come, we can hopefully celebrate our quintercentenary in 79 years' time. On behalf of both myself and Ewan, thank you, brethren, again for the invitation to speak and for your attendance this evening. And I extend to you all a heartfelt invitation to join us at a meeting at the Lodge of Edinburgh as soon as we all can do so. Thank you, brethren.
Well, may I, on behalf of the sizable number attending here this evening, Brother Scott and Brother Ewan, thank you for a very, very interesting talk that covered not only your incredible history, but brought us up to date with lots that are going on in your lodge today, lots that you should be very, very proud of. Congratulations on a fine talk, and absolutely delighted that you were able to come along here this evening and provide us with that education. Thank you to you both. And I'm sure the brethren assembled here this evening would concur with that view. Again, my sincere thanks. We have an opportunity, of course, now for some questions and answers, and I would invite Brother Charles Winston, if he'd be good enough to look after those questions, some of which I hope will be in the chat room before we ask individuals to ask verbally the questions. Brother Charles.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, brethren, for really a most wonderful presentation this evening. I do have a couple of questions. The first one from myself. You mentioned the first minute and the oldest minutes. Do you believe that it was a result of the Shaw Statute that required lodges to keep minutes, that in fact there are no minutes earlier, and that your minutes and the minutes of Father Kilwinning, number nothing, began at around 1599, 1600, and in actual fact, do you believe there are no minutes prior to that date?
Shall I answer that one? So there is a minute prior to that date, and I'm sure you're aware of that. The very first Masonic minute of first minute of any Masonic meeting is that of H's in Haven, which is about 6 months prior to the Lodge of Edinburgh's first recorded minute. But it is only 1 minute, and we've no idea how long the lodge existed after that, if indeed it did exist after that. What do I think about the first minutes? I don't think people did write or record anything, Charles. I think the stonemasons worked from memory. That was part of the. That was a part of. That was the way in which they understood their skills. And if you analysed the Shaw Statutes, which were laid down to govern the trade, as I mentioned earlier, there were rules and regulations. And so the mason would be required to prove themselves once a year, as an example, to produce a piece of test work and so on. But one of the most interesting aspects about the one interesting part of the statute is the fact that they had to prove themselves with the art of memory. And I think that's probably been one of the most valuable gifts that's been transferred between the stonemason and the speculative or Freemason as we know it just now. And so when you're introduced to the craft, you're encouraged to memorize certain aspects. It begins at the very first occasion when a candidate is admitted. They're invariably asked to memorize a test card in most of the Scottish lodges. So that's the introduction of that of memory for a Freemason, I would suggest. Prior to 1598, I don't think there would have been any recorded minutes. It has been suggested that people keep telling me they found this about Mary's Chapel and there's minutes and so on. I don't think there is any other written evidence. There may be some written evidence that relates to trades or the incorporation of Mary's Chapel, but that's completely different from the Masonic Lodge of the Masonic Lodge of Edinburgh.
Thank you, Brother Ewan. I have a question for Brother Harrison from Brother Dr. Douglas Nichol, Provincial Grand Master of Aberdeenshire East. And his question is, if I heard you correctly, you said that the lodge met in the Mint. When was that? The Scottish Mint was dormant from 1709, and I believe it was dissolved in 1800. So that question to Brother Harrison.
Yes, Brother Nichol, thank you for your question. And why my head is down is because I have our Quattrocentenary history book, and I'm positive that I did see reference to the Mint. Yeah. So I'm just trying to find that, and then I will tell you when I find that answer.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I don't believe we have any other questions. A comment from Ian McIntosh, 1789. According to the Lodge history, it moved to a large room in the Mint in October 1790, situated in the Cowgate, and they met there until 1795. Does that help?
I think Brother Scott has found the answer to Brother Douglas Nichol's question. You'll need to unmute yourself, Scott.
Yes, so someone has beat me to it. 1793, December 27th. It just says Mint. And you thought it was dormant from 1709 and dissolved in the early 1800s. So I can't attest that it's the same Mint, but there definitely is in our history book on page 40 a reference to our festival of St. John the Evangelist being there.
And Brother Dr. Douglas Nichol comments that the last Mint building was in the Cowgate between South Grays and Todrick Windwell, and it was demolished in 1877. Brethren, have we any other questions? I wonder, Brother Andrew Mushet.
Yes. Can you hear me, Charles?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. First of all, thank you very much indeed for the invitation tonight. A most illuminating lecture from Brother Rutherford and the Master of Mary's Chapel. It's an observation that I had when Ewan was presenting his part. I noticed that the old Bible that was there, and this is me wearing my printer and binder's hat, I noticed that the Bible had on it Mary's Chapel without the apostrophe S. And then later on, Mary's Chapel has an apostrophe S. I was wondering, obviously the Bible is older. Was there any particular reason? Was it a mistake by the binder? Or does it refer to Mary's Chapel without the apostrophe S in the early records? You look at that in the front there, Mary's Chapel has no apostrophe S on the word Mary's. And there it is in the minute book with Mary's Chapel, a later edition. It's only an observation, an interesting observation. Printers and binders can make mistakes like everyone else, but just an observation. Has anyone got an answer? I'll pass that on to Rutherford.
Yes, of course you would. Now, I would think that it wouldn't be possible for a printer or binder to make a mistake, Andrew. I really do not know the answer to that. I mean, the Geneva Bible or Breach's Bible, that is, I think that will be, well, you would probably be best to have a look at it, but I think that cover is probably not its original cover. So it's a fly cover, I guess. I've no idea why there would be an apostrophe on one and not on the other. I really don't know. I'm sorry. Don't have the answer. But I hope that you might come and have a look.
I'd be delighted to do that. After all, I did produce the centenary book for the Lodge. So
You did,
I would be
indeed.
delighted to pick up on that small anomaly, shall we say.
Absolutely. The more important point about that I referenced was the date someone had on it as well, is 1535. Why 1535? I have no idea. I mean, old operative lodges, I mean, the Freemasons, we all love antiquity, and we can suggest that our lodges started in 1123 and 1304 and blah blah blah. But the records don't exist prior to that. But Shaw's statement of "as of before" leaves it open enough for everyone, all of our old Scottish lodges, to enjoy antiquity. I believe. I have no idea what 1535 relates to. I really don't know. I don't know. There is a date that bothers me, actually, is the date that I have trouble with is the 1475, the Edinburgh Seal of Cause, because it doesn't properly articulate about the trades and the stonemasons being organised as a body. But I think perhaps Shaw came into play because the masons weren't organised as a body, they weren't regulated or controlled, and they were using kids to go up chimneys and all that sort of thing. So, yeah.
We still do that in Govan, you know.
Not in lockdown.
Just before the Queen's speech on Christmas Day.
Brother Alexander Moncrief has pointed out that the apostrophe was introduced in 1529 according to Wikipedia.
Ah, now there we are now.
That'll be correct then, eh?
1529. That's when the apostrophe came into being.
Alistair Henderson's trying to ask a question. Alistair.
Would you unmute, please, Alistair?
He's not unmuted.
Alistair, can you hear us? Can you unmute, please?
Mm-hmm.
I believe you can now unmute yourself, Alistair. Try again, please.
You hear me now?
Yes.
Hey.
Could I ask, how old is the ritual which is currently used in the lodge?
Yes, can I answer that very quickly? It's about 2 weeks old. It changes regularly. Ritual's a fascinating thing for me, I think, because we've gone from very early times when it was, several degrees were conducted on the same night. There was only 2 degrees in years ago. We've extended it, we now have a 3rd degree. We've got all sorts of other rituals that we've introduced, but the rituals were pretty basic, I think, back then. In our lodge, we have since 1970 continually revised the ritual. There was a subcommittee set up in the 70s and developed further in the 80s to have a look at ritual and to perhaps remove, well, there's no perhaps in it. The idea was to remove some of the repetition. Everyone has a different take about how they should operate, and I know some people love lots and lots of flow and ritual, but I'm quite pleased that we've revised the ritual and continue to revise it. An example of what I mean, Alistair, is, when you get to the 3rd degree and someone's imparting information, and then after a long spiel, they pause for about 3 seconds and then they say, in other constitutions, they do this and they do that, and this is how they wave and so on. I never understood why we would do that. Why would we explain how some other constitution would work a piece of ritual or work a degree? And so I was quite pleased that we eventually kind of streamlined and removed repetition and got rid of some parts that we thought were unnecessary. And that was further endorsed, of course, because we're in a fortunate position of having a number of international visitors. And so you would say, you know, in England and other parts of Europe or in Germany, you know, the sign of grief and distress is so-and-so. And at the end, you know, the brother who was from Denmark or Sweden or wherever, they would come up and say, no, we don't do it like that there. So it was completely pointless. So the ritual is not particular to Mary's Chapel. There are certain aspects that are particular to the lodge. For example, we have a second-degree charge that is only used by the Lodge of Edinburgh. It was written by a past master, and it's quite particular. But most of the ritual is fairly standard ritual that's used in most lodges, albeit is perhaps streamlined, and most definitely there has been quite a bit of repetition taken away.
Thank you.
I believe Brother Alec Craib has a comment to make.
Thank you, Brother Charlson. Thank you, brethren, for a most enjoyable and enlightening lecture this evening. Just to support Brother Ewan's comments there about records, an early history of my mother lodge, Old Inverness, Cowinning St. John number 6, states that previous to 1678, the lodge kept their minutes from time to time in irregular manner upon sheets and baffles of paper, most of which now we cannot collect so as to make any of them to purpose, which just supports Brother Ewan's comments about records being kept. Sadly, most of our very early records have disappeared, if there ever were any. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Alec. Do we have any other questions, brethren?
There's one in the chat, Charles.
From Brother MacLeod. Would you like to ask your question, Brother MacLeod?
Hi, hello there. Yeah, it was really just not trying to cause any any further friction. Do the brethren of number 1, do they view themselves as the older of the two lodges with Mother Cowinning because of how the statutes have actually been worded?
Would you like to answer that, Master, or shall I answer it? So, Brother MacLeod, you weren't listening properly at the start. I said I wasn't going to get into a debate about precedency, and it's never been the case for us at all. And I genuinely mean this. I've had a very happy and long and healthy relationship and friendship with a huge number of brethren from Kilwinning. And many years ago, when Tom Wood and I were in the chair together, we had many discussions and debates. And the pair of us actually were content and happy about our antiquity, about the history of our lodges, and we were both particularly keen that both our lodges might consider where we're going in the future. I think it's all, you have to, you know, facts are chiels that Winnie ding. Now the facts are that the Lodge of Edinburgh have records which date back to 1599. There is reference to the lodge existing prior to that, as there is reference to Kilwinning, to Stirling, to Perth, so it goes on. I don't think we have the answer to the oldest lodge in the world. It's not possible to answer that. I'm looking forward to hearing what might be said at the lecture of 1 Bis, because if you were to go to the National Museum, the oldest artifacts, stone masons' implements artifacts in the world, I understand, were found in a place in the Scottish borders called Newstead. Now that's exactly where Lodge Melrose began and where their history stems from. So does anyone, I mean, does it matter who's the oldest lodge? Are we content and collectively happy that we have, excuse me, you know, a group of the oldest lodges in the world? We're revered, as I said at the start. It is absolutely amazing to be a Scottish Mason, and to be a Scottish Mason of a lodge with such antiquity is fantastic. So No one, I can say quite confidently, no one that's been admitted a member of the Lodge of Edinburgh would ever say that they're the oldest lodge in the world. But what they do say is we have the oldest set of records that date from 1599 to the present day. I hope that's answered it, Brother MacLeod.
Absolutely. Very diplomatic.
I didn't get to where I am today. Where am I?
Could I hand back to you now, Mr. Chairman?
Indeed, thank you very much, Charles, and thank you, Brendan, for all those questions and for the answers supplied by Brother Ewan and by Brother Scott. Very knowledgeable about the lodge, as you would have expected, but well done on your presentation, well done on the handling of those questions. A tremendous evening for the Lodge of Edinburgh, Mary Chapel #1, in terms of your presentation and answering. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Can I this time just offer my thanks to all who have joined with us here this evening. It's a delight to see so many of you here interested in the history of our oldest lodges. Tremendous to see the numbers involved. In particular, I would like to thank Grand Master Mason, of course, for his ongoing support for the History and Heritage Group and this particular initiative and everything else he helps us with. And of course, thanks to Brother Ewan Rutherford and Brother Scott Harrison for, as I say, an excellent presentation and answering. Brethren, our next History and Heritage presentation of the oldest lodges is a week today, Thursday the 25th of June at 7 p.m. And on occasion, the Lodge of Melrose, St John, #1 Biz, in the person of the current master, Brother Ken Ross, will give us a talk on the history of that lodge, and perhaps might even venture a thought on the point that you raised there, Brother Ewan, that historic location that I can't recall the name of it, but I'm sure Brother Ken Ross is familiar with it and might make mention of it. The link to our next meeting, as I say, next week, will be put out by Brother Charles Winston early part of next week, Charles, Sunday night, yes, Monday perhaps?
Monday, yeah.
Yep, so that you all have a reminder, you have the link, and we hope that you will come along and join with us that evening and listen to Brother Ken Ross as he tells us of the history of the Lodge of Melrose at St John, #1 Biz. Yep. Just before we close, brethren, we'll leave the mics open just in case anybody wants to say hello, cheerio, or whatever, just for a few seconds in case you want to wave goodbye or whatever, and then we'll close formally. But again, my grateful thanks to you all for your support in this initiative. Thank you, brethren.
Thank you.
Thank you for hosting.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well
Thank
done,
you,
everyone. Scott and Ewan. It was a very interesting lecture. Thank you.
Good to see you, brother. Thank you.
Well done, Ewan. Well done, Scott.
Thank you both.
Cheers, you. Cheers, right, Westford Bastard.
Scott, with one T.
Thank you both. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Bye, John.
Thank you both for a very informative talk. Stay safe, brethren.
You too.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Ian. Brilliant.
Yeah, excellent.
Thanks, Robert.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Ian. Pleasure to be in with you.
Apostrophes last forever.
Well done, both of you.
Yeah, did you enjoy it?
Well
done. Looking forward to next week.
No.
Thanks to you and recently departed Scott there. Thank you both. Thank you.
Thanks, Charles.
Thank you, brother. Absolutely superb. Terrific.
Thank you, brother. Thank you very much, brethren. Thank you, Ewan, for that presentation tonight. Absolutely superb.
Well done, guys.
And thank you all for being here. It's lovely to see almost 80 brethren here for the lecture. So thank you all very much indeed. And please stay safe look after yourselves and look after each other. Good night, brethren.
Thank you.
Hey, Grandmaster Mason, thank you for your support.
Tom, nice to see you.
Good night, brethren.
Hi, brother. Thanks again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ewan.
Good to see you.